What a crowd and what a stage. For speaking at the Web Summit last year was impressive. I think this is even more impressive. So my name is Antonio Ferreira. I've been working in the automotive industry for over 20 years. Over the last 20 years, I've forecasted over 500 technologies. I've introduced them to see the supply and demand side of things. And when you forecast for 20 years, it's always a dangerous game because what you forecasted 20 years ago, people are going to see if it's right or wrong. So it's always a gambling game if you're right or wrong. I've worked with all the major automotive players, and I'll probably consider myself an expert, especially from a technology, supply chain, and mobility perspective. So once upon a time, there was this boy, and this boy was obsessive by cars. He loved cars, he liked playing with cars, especially radio control cars. He used to take them apart and see how they worked, and there was batteries, electric motors, everything seemed very simple. This boy grew up loving cars, and he convinced his friends to buy his first car at 12. So at 12, he was driving around and seeing how cars worked. He started working on cars at 16, and by 21, he's already doing automotive consulting with all the major players. That boy is here on stage now, and he's here to tell you that you should follow your calling. Whatever your passion is, follow it. But usually the calling, you should have two sides of calling. So one side for me was technology, was automotive. The other side was, as a kid, I was obsessed with ants. And so that's the two sides of my calling. There's the technology side and the nature side. There's automotive and there's mobility. So I always see things from two different perspectives. And I think that should be very important for you to look at things from two different perspectives all the time as well. So as I grew up and started playing with cars and finding out about technology and thinking as a boy that cars are so simple, it's a battery, an electric motor, and things worked. I was like, this is madness. They're still using technology from 100 years ago. But as I came to the automotive business, I realized why. The automotive business and the industry has a legacy to maintain. They support a lot of other industries. They support oil, they support steel, they support plastic industry. And as such, it's very hard for them to make decisions very quickly or change technology very quickly because they've got to think about jobs, factories, and then you go into politics and governments. So it's very hard for the automotive industry to change very, very quickly. So my curriculum, I started as an engineer and decided that engineer wasn't for me. I couldn't change the world being an engineer in automotive. I moved to forecast and did all the forecasting of technologies for many years. And then there was a point in between, in 2009, that I'll talk in the next slide, that sort of changed my way of looking at things. So before 2009, I was following the rules, I was playing the game of automotive, I was respecting the legacy of automotive industry with all the players. And then after 2009, I thought, this is not the way it's going to work. The automotive industry needs change, needs disruption, and if they're going to continue playing with the same rules, nothing's going to change. So from 2009, I started advising companies and being very rude almost to them, saying, you've got to change. Things are changing, mobility is here, resources are scarce. You, as an automotive, cannot continue building 50, 60, 70 million vehicles a year and expect things to stay the same. And now my latest company, TechHQ, was started 2017, 2 years ago. We not only do the talk, not only do consulting, but we do develop solutions as well, especially focusing disruptive technologies. So what happened in 2009? Just by chance, I met three amazing entrepreneurs in three different situations of their lives. One was Shai Agassi from Israel. He had a really cool startup called Better Place, which is swapping batteries for electric vehicles. They did some contracts with Renault. Unfortunately, the company's gone bankrupt, but back in 2009, Shai Agassi was the top entrepreneur you could meet. The other one I met is a guy called Travis, by a company that at the time used to be called Uber Cabs, which you probably now everyone knows as Uber. And they were really struggling as a startup. They were trying to get investment, and they were trying to, the pitch was complete. I remember seeing the pitch, and the pitch was really bad, because one of the slides they had, they wanted to invest in fleet of vehicles. And I remember the jury telling them, look, you're never going to survive if you're going to invest in vehicles. Travis went back to the States, he pivoted the idea, got investment, and we got Uber as we have it now. So one simple twist of an idea completely changed Uber. The other entrepreneur was Elon Musk. I met him in 2009 at Frankfurt. At the time, Tesla just had one vehicle, which is a Tesla Roadster. It was literally a Lotus Elise with batteries. It wasn't more than that. But what made it change was, here we had these three guys, no automotive experience, most of them between their 30s and 40s, always coming from software, and they're here disrupting an industry that I know really well, the players will know really well. Something's wrong. But they had no automotive experience, but they also had no responsibility, and that's what makes the difference. So they're willing to disrupt an industry. They didn't care about jobs, they didn't care about factories, they didn't care all of the background and all that happens in the back end of the industry. But it allows them to be disruptive. That's exactly what TechHQ does now, my company. So we look at ways of disrupting the industries and provide the best value from two different perspectives. So not just looking at the automotive industry or just mobility, but we're looking at always things from a complete life cycle. So we do consulting, we do innovation, but we do disruptive innovation. We talk the talk, but we walk the walk as well, because we do develop our own solutions. Like I said, automotive has been struggling for many years. And it's not struggling because we don't have smart guys or smart guys are not doing the right technology. It's just we have a legacy that's so engrossed. It's so dangerous because we have so many jobs to support, so many economies to support. So every time there's a need to change, it's really hard. So going from something as easy as going from internal combustion to electric, it's really hard because you have factories that have been doing internal combustion engines for 50 years. They're not going to change from one day to another because there's investments there. So the automotive, as we know it, it's really efficient. It's one of the most efficient industries in the world. But when it comes to change, it's not that easy. And in the worst position within the automotive industry is the suppliers. The suppliers are really struggling. They're not able to connect with the consumer. They're not able to connect with services. So they're competing on price and becoming commodity suppliers all the time. OEMs the same. They're struggling with branding, for example. As we go with the electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles, you as a user doesn't really care if it's a BMW or Mercedes. It doesn't really matter. And most of them are in debt. For example, Tesla is doing, probably looking at all the OEMs doing the best job at innovation. They're in debt. They just raised $2 billion again about 2 weeks ago. But they're in a very dangerous situation. So they need to change the way they see things. Mobility, we're definitely going in the right direction with data. We have a lot of sensors, we have a lot of data, we know exactly what's happening. The major problem that I'm seeing with mobility is that most of the investment in sensors is being done in the wrong place. Instead of putting technology in cars, why not put in infrastructure? And all of a sudden, not only have the basis for mobility, you have the basis for smart cities as well. So regarding mobility, the main owners of mobility at the moment are data owners. We are owned by Google and Apple. They own our data for the time being. For how long, I'm not sure. It's going to come to a point where me as a consumer and the user, I'm going to say, I love you, Google, but the data is mine. You're not going to be allowed to use it anymore. When that happens, there's going to be a major change in how they behave. Google and Apple could easily buy an OEM. They could start building their own vehicles, but they will still have the same problem with the data. So at the moment, I love Google. I use all the Google services from Google. But one day, I'm going to say the data belongs to me, and I own the data, do whatever I want with my data. When that happens, it's going to be a society thing. And when that decision is made by the society, Google and Apple are going to be in trouble from a data perspective. The other part of mobility is service providers. And going back to what I said about Uber, when Uber was trying to raise money, and one of the slides was that they were going to invest in vehicles. It didn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for them to have assets and asset ownership. But that's exactly what's happening now. They're investing a lot in autonomous vehicles. They're going to reduce the cost of having drivers, correct? Because it's about 75% of the cost of each ride. But who's going to own the vehicles? They're going to change their business model. They're going to be forced to buy vehicles and own vehicles. All of a sudden, they're going to have a huge burden on having assets and maintaining those assets as well. So where service providers, for me, last year were in control of the mobility and everything's going to happen, I think they're going to really be in trouble, especially with, for example, what Tesla is doing as well. So smart cities, we are taking steps in the right direction. Usually there's 4 layers, networks, sensors, platforms, applications. The only thing I see is that we're investing in the wrong place at this moment. We're investing a lot in the apps and the sensors. So we're almost building the roof before building the infrastructures. We really have to first invest in infrastructure and protocols. So blockchain 2. Why do I call it blockchain 2? I wasn't a fan of blockchain 1 at all. When all the ICO rage and everyone wanted to do ICOs to raise money, actually I was against blockchain completely. But when I started looking into 2015 at the potential from an enterprise perspective to build solutions for automotive, mobility, and smart cities, and even looking at ants again, the ant colonies and how they worked. For example, you never seen a traffic jam in an ant colony. It doesn't matter if it's 200 ants, 2,000 ants, 200,000 ants, there's never a traffic jam. So there's a lot we can learn using nature and even basing it on blockchain. I became even a bigger fan of blockchain when 2 of our developers, Alberto and Bernardo, I was talking about a huge problem that happens in supply chain for automotive and logistics. We talked about 2 hours. These are the problems, these are the issues, and this is how it could be solved. They came back to me 2 days later with a prototype based on blockchain. He was solving the problem. It was a basic prototype, just Solidity programming, nothing else, none of the features needed for front end. But the basic protocol was 100 lines of code. For me, I was mind-blown. So we had this issue that one of our clients was having for 15 years. I explained to them, and they came back to me with a solution. There's 118 lines of code. For me, that was mind-blowing. So from that point on, we started using blockchain as one of the technologies at TechHQ for disruptive innovation. But what was happening at that time was most of the people that were doing blockchain solutions, they were marketing themselves as that, and they're producing solutions on the left-hand side. It was very complex. Clients couldn't understand. So at TechHQ, started doing things very differently. We started doing things thinking of the end consumer. And whenever you talk about blockchain, or especially for the final user, for the final market, if someone says, blah, 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 blockchain, that's probably the wrong way of doing it. You shouldn't even mention blockchain. Blockchain should be completely just fire it to the end user. Plus, blockchain is very powerful, but it's very basic. Usually, we have to combine it with the other disruptive technologies, so Internet of Things, data analytics, and artificial intelligence. So for the last 2 years, we have numerous cases with our clients, from automotive to pharma, aerospace, logistics. So we have plenty of lessons learned over the last years how to implement blockchain solutions in industry. It gets us to where we are now with our project. We just created, for the last 6 months, a project internally. It is open source. And let me just describe it to you. It's an end-to-end, non-linear blockchain-based open source modular protocols that provide meaningful value well beyond an asset's physical attributes and life cycle. So you completely ignore all of that. You're an end user, and just think of the last part. Meaningful value well beyond an asset's physical attributes and life cycles. Because what's happening with an asset, for example, as a vehicle, is very much is what Morai, the Greek goddesses, used to do. They used to grab a piece of line, which is your life. This piece of string is going to be this long, and then we're going to cut it off there. That's exactly how we treat vehicles at the moment, for example. It starts production, it's going to be 5 years life cycle, and it's going to be end probably in 10 years' time. That's how the industry works, and that's why we chose the name Morai, because the industry is, they're not taking control. They're accepting their fate and destiny that they're going to fail, especially the supply chain, and especially the OEMs. So there's 4 parts, 4 modules to Morai. There's a supply chain that's done in a completely different way. that's done until now from a blockchain perspective. We built an economy with tokens, not just to create monetary value, but value across the complete value chain. There's more than just money. We built services on top, so services would be something like an Uber, mobility, and we created a marketplace that's going to create value for the tokens and for the economy and provide the supply and demand that's going to create value for the tokens. There's a fifth part, which is the modules, and usually a combination of modules will create a service. So from a diagram perspective, it looks something like this. You have the framework underneath with the services I just mentioned. You have the modules on one side and the tokens on the other side. And if you combine different modules, you can come up with a service. For example, if you combine a module for transport, energy, payment, and communications, all of a sudden you have a service that could compete easily with Uber. All of this is based on open source. The modules can connect to our framework through an API. So anyone that wants to develop a module or a combination of modules, they can, and all of a sudden they can have a service that could compete, for example, in mobility. The fifth point is, because we provide an infrastructure, there's going to be new business models that don't exist yet. All of a sudden, anyone can create a new business model. This is how most supply chain solutions in the blockchain work at the moment. They use ERC 721, and we created quite a few of those solutions. And this is great for asset ownership. So if you have a complete part that moves across the chain and creates another, there's some added value, and there's another part. So this is more or less how it works. This is, again, why we chose the Morai name, because the solutions that happen at the moment, they're very linear. They're very bad, for example, at raw materials. It's very hard to track raw materials up to a complete vehicle, for example. But it's quite good at focusing in the middle, how parts are exchanged and asset ownership. The supply chain is a lot more than that, and I'll call it supply value chain because, for example, the industry is so complex. It has 30,000 parts, usually 16 systems, and it goes from materials to complete products. So we needed a more complex solution to solve the problem. And this is why we are different. Not only do we apply ERC 721 asset ownership, we apply DAG supply chain data technology to as well. DAG is directed a cyclic graph, and it looks something like this. So all of a sudden, not just a linear solution, all of a sudden it can track where value is added. It could be a part, it could be a service, it could be a process, it could be assembly, and you can track all of that in a timeline, going forwards and going backwards as well. So our token has 5 parts, 2 from the supply chain, and then 3 layers of information that comes from the services marketplace. Why? I think us as a society, we have to approach things from a different perspective. There's not enough resource in the planet for us to continue the way we're doing. And the same way that makes us humans, usually there's very few factors that makes us humans. For example, communication is a good example. And why, for example, services like WhatsApp, social services are so successful, because we as humans need communication. Another part that makes us human is trust. And at the moment, trust, we struggle to trust someone else, either in doing work or even something as easy as news, and especially everything with news. Trust, with the technology that we have in the future, is going to be automatic. In fact, systems are going to be trustless. So with systems like this, it means that we're going to have value well beyond the physical attributes of a product. We have to be accountable for the complete life cycle of a product, from cradle to grave, or even from cradle to cradle if you take recycling into account. So our system provides value well beyond the product life cycle, empowers the real value providers, and enables brand new business models that never thought before. So this is what our system with the token and the token economy behind it can actually do, which completely changes the way automotive and mobility works at the moment. So at the top, it works exactly as it is now. Underneath, it's the tokens that link to the manufacturers that's happening. So you could go from a tier 2 that's creating a small gear part right up to the vehicle. Then you have the division where usually the client stands. And usually there is a division between the vehicle manufacturer and the client. And the third part, which is brand new, which is the services that you can gain value from. So mobility, for example, or even data. And going back to me owning the data, it's going to come to a point where I'm going to decide what I'm going to do with the data. So if I want to sell my data, I can actually sell it as well. So you're going to have a completely different way of looking at the market. 90% of the value in automotive is created on this left-hand side. So why should someone like an Uber that does an app and probably creates 10% of value gain most of that value from a service economy? We're talking, I've done some estimations, we're talking about 300,000 euros for a life cycle of a vehicle. And that 300,000 can be divided across the complete life chain. So it could go back to the supply chain, to the suppliers, it could go back to you as a user, or it could go back to the OEM. Either way, it's going to be a balanced expectation. I've done some numbers expectation, but I'll give you some examples. For example, a system supplier that sells a part for 3,000 euros, all of a sudden, as a 10-year life cycle, they can get 18,000 euros. For an OEM, they can get 183,000 back. And you, as a user, for example, instead of paying 120,000 euros for an electric vehicle, top of the range, you end up paying 60,000. So everyone benefits from it. I'm going to jump to quite a few slides, so I'm already well over time. But with this solution, then we can have different mobility profiles. All of a sudden, you can be a driver, and I want to buy the vehicle, and I want to drive it. Or I can be just a user, go from A to B, use the service like any Uber solution. Or I can be a tech investor. I have some investors. I want to invest some money, and I want to invest in technology rather than a complete vehicle. And you can have service provider, traders, service investors. All of a sudden, you can have all of these profiles that bring value to the complete ecosystem. I'll give you an example. Imagine this tech investor has 150,000 to invest. Panasonic is delivering batteries to Tesla, pre-production. Imagine this is pre-production 3 years. And they say, we're going to provide some of these tokens for half price. Let's say instead of 3,000, we sell them for 1,500 euros. So this investor invests in 100 battery packs. They're going to be fitting in Tesla. They pay 150,000 in tokens, but they get 300,000 in token economy. They use the battery packs in vehicles, in different services. It could be mobility, it could be energy, data, whatever. That investor is going to get 450,000 back in profit. So it's a different way of looking at value. It's a different way of producing value within automotive. And the huge difference is, if the value comes back to the automotive and the supply chain, it means that instead of producing 60 million vehicles a year or 70 million vehicles a year, we can produce half that. And that's a huge benefit for the planet, and a different way of looking, a different perspective of looking at the industry, and how we can save resources in a planet. And the service can be very flexible as well. So imagine one day I own a vehicle that's being used as an Uber, for example, and I'm making X amount of money. And I go into the marketplace and realize, for example, that instead of using it as an Uber, Amazon is paying more for transported goods. So with modularity, I can change the vehicle, and I can all of a sudden provide as a different service. And there's all of new business models that can be applied. One that I'm very passionate about is personal carbon footprint, where if you have the complete supply chain on a blockchain, you can go back and find out exactly what carbon footprint each part produced up to the vehicle, and now that impacts me. So all of a sudden I can go up to a company and say, you're providing this carbon footprint, the supply chain is providing this, and me as a final consumer, I'm producing exactly this carbon footprint. So with this sort of new solution, you have new business models available. And you have the basis of what could be smart city in the future, 2.0, using exactly the same framework. The value proposition is always, we always think of the end user. So look at the benefits, the features, and the experience. It doesn't matter if the back end is very complex and it's very technological. We always look at how consumers can benefit from this solution. So Mirai is open source. We are looking for partners that want to join up in this solution. And even more than partners, we're looking for talent as well. So if you're interested in development, if you're interested in blockchain, get in contact with me. I'll be more than happy to give you more information regarding the solution. Our talent team, development team is based in Lisbon. I'll be more than happy to get in contact for you to get in contact with them as well, because we're going to develop this as open source, and this is one solution that can bring back value to the complete supply chain. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, hands together for Antonio Ferreira.